Hey, thank you for joining us. This is just a short presentation because of some work that is happening at the state level regarding the essential instructional practices in early mathematics. And we're going to share a few brief points about utilizing your curricular resources in alignment with those practices. My name is Kristi Hanby. I am one of 4 K-8 math consultants at RESA. And I'm going to give you a moment if you would like to go find the essential instructional practices. If you haven't had access to them before, you can do that at mathessentials.org. While you're looking for those, or if you want to pause me, that's fine. I'll just share as a really brief overview. It kind of helps orient you to the document. Essential instructional practices 1 through 3 are all about classroom environment. It's about the norms that we set, about the equity in participation. It's about how we're building students' identity as mathematicians. Essential instructional practice number 4 is formative assessment. Essential instructional practice 5 through 7 are instructional routines. So these are the things that we would see teachers doing each day. They include things like interactive mental number sense routines, and engaging in cognitively demanding tasks, which is actually where our focus will be today. And formative assessment is always going to be embedded in those processes, those instructional routines, in a very observational manner. And then essential instructional practice 8 is about families and caregivers and how we partner with them to support our young learners. So I'll just get into it. Essential 5, if you take a peek, is about cognitively demanding tasks. And we want to do this in the context of curricular resources. And so I'm just going to share with you, this is a lesson from grade 2 on equal parts. The standard for 2nd grade as it relates to fractions is that students should be able to partition shapes into halves, thirds, and fourths, and to be able to name those things. And so I'm going to show you, these are all of the pages that are in this particular curricular resource for this particular lesson. So this might not be the resource that you use, but it's meant to represent what your teachers might find when they open up the curricular resource that you do use, and are faced with many things that students could be engaged in related to this lesson on partitioning shape. So we were in a professional learning recently. We asked teachers to just circle anything in this lesson that could be used as a learning activity of some sort. And also, as they did so, to think about the amount of time that it would take for students to engage in that activity in some meaningful way. And so what you see on the screen here is all of the things that teachers said this could be used for a learning activity within the classroom. And so there were 12 different things in this lesson. And they ranged from lasting between 10 and 30 minutes or more. And so what's represented on the screen, teachers really thought was somewhere between 2 and 3 hours worth of activity. When we finished that conversation, it became clear that teachers really have to make choices when they open up their curricular resource. There really is no option for them other than to start making choices about the learning tasks that they are going to use in order to engage their students on any given day. And that brings us then to Essential 5. And the crux of it really is that when we're making those choices, that we're selecting what the math ed literature has called cognitively demanding tasks. You can think of it as things that cause rigorous thinking that's appropriate for the grade level of the student, that allows them to make connections, might be relevant to their world. But we want to get them into deep thought about the mathematics. We want them reasoning and sense making. And some of our curriculum directors, when they saw this, said this reminds them of DOK. And so we want them to have high DOK rigor in their classrooms every day. So I'm going to show you 2 learning activities that came from that lesson. Now we're zooming in a little bit closer. So the one that just showed up on the screen, I'll give you a moment to look at what it would be asking of students. And so as you see here, above the share and show, there's examples given for students, and below the share and show, students would be asked to count the number of equal parts and then name what one of those equal parts would be called. And so if we think about this rigorous thinking, making connections, or relevance piece, even in the context of DOK, we're going to put this relatively low in cognitive demand or relatively low in DOK. It really is less of a fraction activity and more of a counting activity, more of a vocabulary kind of learning than it is about really deep understanding about fractions. And I'm going to show you this other activity that came from the same lesson and give you a moment to read it. Okay, so I just want you to imagine what students might be doing in this case. And so they have maybe construction paper shapes. They could have rectangles, squares, circles, and they're asked to fold these. If I wanted to make this just slightly more related to their lives, I might say, imagine that this is a brownie or a cookie, and you want to share it. You want to share it with 2 friends, or you want to share it with 3 friends or 4 friends. Everybody is folding, and there might be some really nice conversation that happens around, well, do we have to fold them the same way in order for them to be, for my brownie to be cut into thirds and your brownie to be cut into thirds? Do they have to be folded the same way? Some students might be kind of messy or sloppy in their folding, and so there might be conversation about, is that a fair way to share the cookie or the brownie? And if not, what do we have to do and be really careful about when we're doing this? And so this could be, 20 or 30 minutes worth of activity with students, with lots of conversation, lots of sharing, lots of student ownership of that. And in the end, we're going to get to that deep learning of what are fractions, why equal parts are important, what we call these different things, but it will be much more meaningful to students. And so for that reason, we're going to choose this as a cognitively demanding task. You might have noticed, by the way, that in this particular curricular resource, this activity is considered for advanced learners. But if you think about it, like any 2nd grader could take a piece of paper, fold it, and have some conversation about the sharing of food items. And so we don't consider this to be for advanced learners. We really think that this is the kind of learning that kids can be doing every day. So I'm not going to show this video, but I am going to leave this screen here long enough for you to see that there is a website you can go to. There's a YouTube channel where we are starting to collect videos of Michigan classrooms that are engaged in the essential instructional practices. So it's not just about what you choose from the curricular resource, but it's how it's enacted in the classroom. Okay. In that YouTube channel, you're going to find Michigan classrooms. Those videos are being taken right here in Wayne County and across Michigan. Those are teachers enacting the essential instructional practices. You'll also hear from experts from the field who are helping us really frame transformational change within our schools. They're always adding video to that YouTube channel. So once you find it, you might want to subscribe to it so that you can get any new videos that might come up. Okay. So when we do this work with teachers, I think it's important for our leadership to sort of hear what they are saying. And this is what we heard. We'd love to be able to work this way with students. It connects with what we believe about students, relationships, development. It does feel like a really big change, but they know that they need to give more time for students to explore, to make sense of, to use tools to express their thinking, and to work more collectively and collaboratively with their classmates. But this was also an interesting thing they said. It felt a little bit risky. Given the pressure that they feel in their schools, it felt a little bit risky to go do that kind of work with students. And we had a real wondering around where that risky feeling is coming from. This is my understanding of that risk, but I would say that in pursuing depth, teachers are really concerned about what they might be losing in the breadth of things, right? And so when we zoom in on one lesson and we do one task within that lesson with maybe a little bit of follow-up practice work, there's a lot of depth to be had there. But in doing so, I think teachers become concerned with what they're going to lose in the breadth. And so one of the things that you will find as we explore is that depth actually leads to much better learning. Students are more connected to it. They're making sense of it more, and they're building on their understanding continually. Okay. And so we're just going to switch over to thinking about what can we do at the school level in order to support educators. And so this document is also coming from the early math work. We have Dr. Allison Resnick, who is working with us to think about what is that trajectory that teachers find themselves on when they move from resistance toward compliance, which is really sort of doing something out of an obligation to others, and then eventually doing this because they have an obligation to themselves. For whatever reason, they've seen that it's helping students, they're finding more joy in the classroom, but they've started to internalize that practice. And so that's all to say that resistance and compliance are a natural part of that process. But the honest truth is, and we know this, that some teachers don't make it to internalization. And so we need to ask ourselves, what are we doing in our schools? What do we share as a part of our meetings? What do we prioritize as far as documentation? Where are we focused as it pertains to the impact of learning? And how is that influencing the trajectory for teachers to move along that trajectory toward internalization, right? And the reason that we need to support our teachers in getting to that point of internalization is because that's when we start to really see benefits for kids. So this image is really just to help you think about what are the roles that people are playing in your schools? What events are taking place there? What routines are in place? The meetings that you hold, the documents that you dig into, and what tools do you utilize in those spaces? Are they moving us in the right direction? Or is it possible sometimes roles, events, routines, or tools are actually acting in a little bit of tension with the change that we'd like to see? Right. So just to start to wrap up, the reason that we did this learning is because there is a module that has been launched for Essential 5. You can find all of the modules as they are added to the state website at the link in red there. Just a little bit to know is that there's typically going to be 2 modules for each launch that happens. So the launch for Essential 5 has a module that is on foundations, understanding and learning the research behind why there's a focus on cognitively demanding tasks. And then a second, which is called a case study, which is really about applying the research. And so in this case, it's a going into a curricular resource, making some choices, getting some feedback from the module around the choices that were made and their cognitive demand. The document on the far left, we can get to you, and it really just lifts these questions, right? So it gives you access to the early math modules. It lifts these questions on the far right. So what shifts in our center, school, district system might be necessary if we're going to strategically support educators toward that internalization? How might the EIPs relate to other initiatives or the continuous improvement efforts within your center, school, or district system? So we don't want to see them as isolated, but just the way that we're working together as a system toward those school improvement goals. And who might you want to talk to within your district to make this work more systematic? Teachers often will find themselves, wanting to do this kind of work, but maybe feeling like they're doing it in a more individualized way. And so in what way can we make this work systematic? Just one more thing. When we work with schools around curricular resources, we just kind of want to fill you in on what that might look like. We have here, I'm just going to click this link to a sample first grade place value unit. Our thinking around curricular work is once you've made a choice, and we can help you with thinking about making a choice for a new curricular resource. But then there's that second layer of work, which is in each lesson, which task are we going to choose that's cognitively demanding in nature? So for example, this is an everyday math unit. It's first grade. It's a place value unit. And so what we did is we worked together with a team of teachers and we said, well, let's go into every lesson and identify something that would be considered cognitively demanding for this grade level and aligns to this learning target. And so in this one, it looks like, I'm just looking at the preview over here, they're given a number of cubes in a bag and they have to say how many cubes are in the cup and how they organize their count. Early in first grade, this is really just thinking about helping students understand that there are ways of grouping our counting that actually helps us be more efficient. It's also some really early multiplicative thinking, right? That we don't have to count by ones, we can count by something other than ones. And so we ask them, how did you count the objects? And students will start to see, I can count them by ones, but I can also count them in other ways. And they learn from their peers as they do this kind of work. And so that's the kind of work that we do around curricular resources. We can help you in reviewing and adopting, but there's really another layer, which is that choosing of curricular, of cognitively demanding tasks. Okay, I am going to wrap this up just by giving our contact information. David Sword, who you didn't see listed earlier, is our 912 consultant. We do a number of things related to professional learning and mathematics, equity, thinking about what do we need to deconstruct about our traditional math instruction in order to be really genuine in our efforts in equity. Math Leaders runs 4 times each year. This year, we're really digging into learning those essential instructional practices and how it does connect to equity. Number Talks, this is Essential 6. So we offer self-paced learning of that essential practice. It's out there on Moodle. We offer it 4 times a year and teachers can get sketches for doing that on their own time. MTSS in mathematics, we use Math Recovery as our diagnostic assessment tool, and we train teachers in that diagnostic assessment, which really helps them understand the learning progression that's developmentally appropriate for children's mathematics understanding and helps them inform instruction. In the past, we have had grant funding to pay for those Math Recovery kits. We think that that is probably expiring, so I'm just letting you know that as a heads up. There is a new initiative starting in the county that might focus on some math coaching. in your districts. We have just tiny little inkling of information. We're hoping that there will be more information coming soon. We also do a number of smaller projects: disciplinary literacy, building thinking classrooms, curriculum adoption, formative assessment, differentiation. You can call us and ask about the needs that your school might have. I thank you for taking the time today. Please reach out if you have any further questions, and thank you so much.